Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Have you ever heard of construction so grandiose that they defy logic? Monuments built with unimaginable wealth that challenge time, mysteriously fell or hide secrets that science still tries unsuccessfully to explain? The Bible mentions some of the most impressive buildings in history, and each of them carries a hidden mystery, a lost message, or a truth that few dare to investigate. In this video, you'll embark on a fascinating journey through 5 of the most incredible biblical constructions and the secrets they conceal. But stay alert. The last one on the list will challenge everything you thought you knew and may leave you speechless. Are you ready to explore the mysteries that unite faith, history, and archaeology? Then get ready, because what comes next may change your perspective on the past and the future. Let's get started. The greatest constructions of the Bible. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to build a gigantic ship without modern technology? No cranes, no electric saws, just wood, calloused hands, and unshakable faith. That's exactly what Noah did. And centuries later, his story continues to intrigue scientists, archaeologists, and those who believe in the impossible. The Bible reveals to us that in a time of extreme corruption and chaos on earth, God chose a man for a mission that seemed impossible, to build a colossal refuge to save his family and representatives of every animal species from a global flood. Now, picture the scene. Noah receives this divine order. He begins to cut wood, carve joints, and design compartments. The work was grueling. Decades of construction under the scorching sun, facing mockery, doubt, and the burden of being responsible for preserving God's creation. But the ark was not a simple boat. Its dimensions were gigantic, approximately 450 feet in length, 75 feet in width, and 45 feet in height. To give you an idea, it was nearly the size of a modern cargo ship, all made of gopher wood and coated with pitch to resist the waters. Now think with me. How did Noah accomplish this feat without advanced tools? How did he organize the animals inside the ark? And above all, was there really a flood capable of covering mountains? Myth or reality? Science tries to answer. Geologists and historians have found evidence of a massive flood in the Mesopotamian region. Studies suggest that thousands of years ago, a catastrophic event may have submerged large areas, giving rise to the tradition of a global flood. But what stands out are the supposed discoveries of the Ark itself. In 1959, a Turkish pilot flew over Mount Ararat and identified a formation resembling the hull of a ship. Since then, various expeditions have attempted to confirm if the remains of Noah's vessel are there. Some missions have found petrified wood pieces and even geological structures consistent with a large ship. But the question remains, is it really Noah's Ark? Science still debates, meanwhile faith remains unwavering. Imagine standing before a city surrounded by colossal walls, so thick and imposing that they seemed impassable. A fortress built to withstand any enemy, protecting its inhabitants from any external threat. Now, try to visualize the impossible. These walls don't fall to battering rams, explosives, or war machines. They crumble due to something much more enigmatic, the sound of trumpets and cries of faith. This is the story of Jericho, one of the oldest cities in humanity, and the scene of one of the most mysterious and controversial events in the Bible. An event so extraordinary that it still defies logic and intrigues scientists and historians. But did this really happen? And more importantly, what does science have to say about this impressive collapse? According to biblical accounts, Jericho was a fortified city, protected by walls so high and sturdy that any attack seemed practically impossible. For the Israelites, who had wandered the desert for 40 years, conquering it seemed like an insurmountable challenge. But God had a plan that defied all known military strategies. The Israeli army received a peculiar order march around the city once a day in complete silence for 6 days. No attacks, no weapons, just a silent march, as if waiting for an invisible signal. On the 7th day, something different was supposed to happen. 7 trips around the city, trumpets echoing through the air, and a unified shout from all the people. And then, abruptly and inexplicably, the walls simply collapsed. Not by war machines, not by predictable earthquakes, just by sound. Now stop and think, is that possible? How could a simple march and the sound of trumpets bring down such resistant walls? Throughout the 20th century, archaeologists began investigating Jericho in search of answers. And that's when the story got even more interesting. In the 1950s, British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon conducted a detailed excavation in the region and made a shocking discovery. There were indeed ruins of a large wall that seemed to have collapsed suddenly. But the most surprising part? The evidence suggested that the walls fell from the inside out. This was something completely unusual. Typically, when a city is invaded, the walls are torn down from the outside due to attacks. But in Jericho, the collapse seemed to have come from within. This coincides with the biblical account. The walls weren't brought down by human forces, but by something much greater. But what if there's a natural explanation for this event? Some researchers suggest that an earthquake may have been the real cause of the collapse. Indeed, Jericho is located on a geological fault, and tremors are relatively common in the region. The idea of the earthquake could make sense were it not for one crucial detail. How could Joshua and the Israelites have predicted exactly when an earthquake would happen? And more, how could it have occurred exactly at the moment of the trumpet blasts and war cries? If an earthquake was responsible, then we would have to admit an almost impossible synchronicity. Could this be one of those cases where science and faith meet? What if Jericho fell due to an event far beyond what we can explain? One thing is certain, the story of Jericho remains one of the greatest mysteries of biblical archaeology. But get ready, because the next structure we'll explore is even more mysterious and challenging. Imagine a building so grand that its walls were covered in pure gold, reflecting the sunlight in a celestial glow. A place so sacred it was built to house the very presence of God. This was Solomon's temple, the masterpiece of Israel's sacred architecture, a construction shrouded in mystery, reverence and power. But how was such an architectural marvel erected? What does archaeology reveal about its existence? And more importantly, what is its true spiritual significance? The story begins with David, the great king of Israel. His heart burned with the desire to build a temple for God. However, this mission would not be his, but that of his son and successor, Solomon, the wisest king in history. The chosen location was not by chance. Mount Moriah, a point of energy and faith, was the very place where centuries earlier Abraham had almost sacrificed his son Isaac, a location marked by supernatural and divine events. But the construction of the temple would not be just an engineering feat. It would be a colossal project where every detail had a divine purpose. The stones used in the construction were precisely carved, cut, and prepared far from the building site. An impressive detail. No sound of hammers or tools was heard at the site, in accordance with God's command. This raises an intriguing question. How was it possible to move giant stone blocks, fit them perfectly, and raise a monumental temple without the use of noisy tools on the site itself? The cedars of Lebanon, one of the most noble woods of the time, were brought from distant lands. Their sacred aroma filled the air, and their use was not just aesthetic but a symbol of royalty and connection to the divine. And then comes the most impressive detail. The entire interior of the temple was covered in pure gold. The walls glowed with a celestial brilliance. Sculpted cherubim, palm trees and flowers adorned every corner, creating a scene that transcended earthly reality. But the true heart of the temple was an even more sacred place, the Holy of Holies. There, the Ark of the Covenant, the most mysterious artifact in history, rested as a symbol of God's physical presence among the people. After 7 years of intense work, the temple was finally ready. But what happened on the day of its inauguration was something no one could have predicted. Solomon gathered all the people of Israel for an unforgettable ceremony. Before the altar, the king offered a powerful prayer, asking God to accept this house as his dwelling on earth, and then it happened. Suddenly, a glorious cloud descended and filled the entire temple, a tangible, indescribable presence. What followed was even more impressive. Fire from the sky fell upon the altar, consuming the sacrifices before the astonished eyes of the Israelites. It was the definitive sign. God accepted that temple as his sanctuary. The people kneeled in awe. At that moment, they were in the very presence of the living and real Creator. But the story doesn't end here. The Temple of Solomon would remain an enigma throughout the centuries. Its secrets, its destruction, and the mysteries surrounding it echo to this day. And get ready, because the next construction we will explore is even more impressive and challenging. Imagine a world where all humanity speaks a single language. There are no barriers, no borders. All peoples live in perfect communication, united by a single purpose, to build a tower so high that it would reach the heavens. But this ambition, instead of bringing men closer to God, stirred his wrath. And then something unbelievable happened. Communication was irreversibly broken, and the great construction was abandoned forever. But what really was the Tower of Babel? Did it truly exist? What does archaeology have to say about this story? And more importantly, what great lesson does this construction teach us even today? The Bible tells us that after the great flood, the descendants of Noah began to spread throughout the world and repopulate the earth. For a time they remained united, speaking a single language, something that gave them extraordinary power, the ability to organize without limits, to advance without obstacles. At some point these people decided to settle in the plain of Shinar, an area that today corresponds to ancient Mesopotamia. But they didn't just want to live there, they wanted to leave their mark. With innovative technology for the time, bricks fired in the fire and bitumen as mortar, they began to build a monumental structure, a tower so large, so ambitious, that it would become the ultimate symbol of human self-sufficiency. Let us make a name for ourselves so that we will not be scattered over the face of the earth. Genesis 11:4, they proclaimed. They wanted to reach the heavens, but not only that, they wanted to challenge God. The construction progressed, the tower rose higher and higher, the power of man seemed limitless. But then God intervened. He observed the work and made a radical decision to confuse the language of men so that they could no longer understand each other. Now try to imagine the scene. A mason asks for a brick, but his colleague understands he asked for water. The foreman tries to give orders, but no one understands him. What was once a unified project becomes absolute chaos in a matter of moments. The construction site turns into pandemonium. What was once an empire of perfect communication was now fragmented. The men could no longer understand each other, and without coordination, the great tower was abandoned. The builders dispersed, spreading across the world and forming the different nations and cultures we know today. But the big question remains, did this really happen? For many scholars, the Tower of Babel may have been inspired by a ziggurat, a type of temple in the shape of a stepped pyramid commonly found in Mesopotamia. The most famous of these structures was the Etemenanki, a massive temple built in ancient Babylon in honor of the god Marduk. Historical records indicate that the Etemenanki was called the house that unites heaven and earth, a name that strangely resembles the purpose of the Tower of Babel as described in the Bible. Over the centuries, the temple was destroyed and rebuilt several times before being permanently abandoned. Could it be the original tower mentioned in the scriptures? There is no definitive answer, but the resemblance between the descriptions is striking. More than just a story about the fragmentation of human language, the story of the Tower of Babel can be interpreted as a timeless warning. How far does human ambition go? Could the relentless pursuit of power and greatness lead us to challenges beyond our understanding? And get ready, because the next structure we're going to explore holds even more surprising secrets. Imagine living in a time of pain and exile. Your people have been torn from their land, forcibly taken to a foreign nation, and watched as your sacred temple, the heart of your faith, was reduced to rubble. For many, this would have been the end of their connection with God, but not for the Jews. When they returned from Babylonian captivity, they brought with them a dream to rebuild the temple and restore their faith. The second temple of Jerusalem was not just a building. It was a symbol of rebirth, hope and identity for an entire nation. But how was this grand construction built? What made it special? And above all, why was it destroyed in such a tragic way? After 70 years of exile in Babylon, the Jews were finally allowed to return home. The Persian king Cyrus the Great not only allowed their return, but also ordered the rebuilding of the temple and helped finance the work. But when they began to build, they faced a harsh reality. The new temple would not be like Solomon's. It was smaller, less luxurious, without the Ark of the Covenant, without the shine of pure gold covering its walls. The elders who still remembered the first temple wept with sadness in their eyes. The new structure seemed pale compared to the former glory. But then something unexpected happened. The prophet Haggai brought a surprising message. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former. Haggai 2:9. But how could this be? How could a seemingly inferior temple be more glorious than Solomon's? Centuries later, Herod the Great, an ambitious king obsessed with grandeur, decided to expand and embellish the Second Temple. What was once a modest structure became one of the wonders of the ancient world. The size of the temple courtyard was doubled, creating a vast religious complex. Monumental columns and huge walkways were built, impressing any visitor. Parts of the temple were coated with gold and white marble, making its structure shine under the Jerusalem sun. The result? A building so splendid that it left pilgrims in awe. The temple became the beating heart of Judaism, where crowds gathered to pray, sacrifice, and seek the presence of God. It was in this temple that Jesus taught, drove out the merchants, and made a shocking prophetic declaration: "Not one stone here will be left on another, everyone will be thrown down," Matthew 24:2, a prophecy that would later be devastatingly fulfilled. In 70 AD, the Roman Empire besieged Jerusalem in response to the First Jewish Revolt. After months of brutal fighting, the Romans invaded the city and set the temple on fire. Historical accounts tell that the gold melted with the flames and dripped between the stones, leading the Roman soldiers to dismantle every part of the temple to recover the precious metal. When it was all over, nothing remained but ruins. All that was left was a piece of the structure. The western wall, one of the last remnants of the temple's grandeur, and at the same time a reminder of the pain of loss. But the story of the temple doesn't end here. The temple was the place of God's presence, where sacrifices were offered and the people sought forgiveness and guidance. But something changed. Jesus brought a revolutionary message. He declared, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." John 2:19. He wasn't just speaking about stones and walls, he was speaking about himself. The true temple would no longer be a building. God would dwell in the hearts of people. Now think with me, if God wants to dwell in you, is your life prepared to receive him? Let this reflection stay with you. Thank you for watching this far. May God bless you, and we'll see you soon.
In a time of extreme corruption and chaos on earth, God chose me for a mission that seemed impossible: to build a colossal refuge to save my family and representatives of every animal species from a global flood.
Now picture the scene. Noah receives this divine order. He begins to cut wood, carve joints, and design compartments. The work was grueling. Decades of construction under the scorching sun, facing mockery, doubt, and the burden of being responsible for preserving God's creation. But the ark was not a simple boat. Its dimensions were gigantic, approximately 450 feet in length, 75 feet in width, and 45 feet in height. To give you an idea, it was nearly the size of a modern cargo ship, all made of gopher wood and coated with pitch to resist the waters. Now think with me, how did Noah accomplish this feat without advanced tools? How did he organize the animals inside the ark? And above all, was there really a flood capable of covering mountains? Myth or reality? Science tries to answer. Geologists and historians have found evidence of a massive flood in the Mesopotamian region. Studies suggest that thousands of years ago, a catastrophic event may have submerged large areas, giving rise to the tradition of a global flood. But what stands out are the supposed discoveries of the Ark itself. In 1959, a Turkish pilot flew over Mount Ararat and identified a formation resembling the hull of a ship. Since then, various expeditions have attempted to confirm if the remains of Noah's vessel are there. Some missions have found petrified wood pieces and even geological structures consistent with a large ship. But the question remains, is it really Noah's Ark? Science still debates, meanwhile, faith remains unwavering.
Imagine standing before a city surrounded by colossal walls, so thick and imposing that they seemed impassable. a fortress built to withstand any enemy, protecting its inhabitants from any external threat. Now, try to visualize the impossible. These walls don't fall to battering rams, explosives, or war machines. They crumble due to something much more enigmatic, the sound of trumpets and cries of faith.
This is the story of Jericho, one of the oldest cities in humanity and the scene of one of the most mysterious and controversial events in the Bible.
The Lord has chosen me to build a house for His name. This temple will be a place of worship and a symbol of our covenant with God.
Solomon's temple stood as a magnificent testament to faith and devotion. Built with the finest materials and unparalleled craftsmanship, it became the spiritual heart of Israel.
Let us build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. But well, our pride led to our downfall.
The Tower of Babel represents humanity's ambition and the consequences of overreaching. It serves as a reminder of the importance of humility and unity.
This second temple, though not as grand as Solomon's, restored our faith and brought us closer to God once more.
The Second Temple became a vital center for Jewish worship and community life, standing as a beacon of hope and resilience through turbulent times. These monumental structures from biblical times are more than just ancient buildings. They are enduring symbols of faith, perseverance, and the human spirit's quest for the divine.